We've been arguing that leaders need to worry about culture and be very curious about it. And one way to help us is the models that are around in academic life. The one we picked to really investigate culture is Jerry Johnson's Culture Web. What I'm going to do now is explain the components of that model. I personally have found it an enormously helpful model when I go into organizations and I'm trying to understand culture in a deeper way. And that requires real work. And this model has been very helpful in unpacking the dimensions of culture to help me understand it. And of course, the critical thing, if you want to change a culture, you absolutely need to understand it. So let's go through the model then. You'll see that the model has a number of components. And these together make the paradigm, in other words, the culture that you are exploring. The components are, very briefly, symbols. What are the symbols in the organization? What are the stories and myths? What are the rituals and routines that shape it? Power, control systems, and structure. But let me unpack that. So symbols. It's very easy to underestimate the power of symbols. Organizations will have symbols that they privilege, and they have an enormous power. Let me give you a personal example. I won't name the organization, but my husband used to work for an organization 20 years when he started that job. He bought himself a new suit. It had an incredibly wide pinstripe on it. The second day he was called into his boss's office and said, "You cannot wear a suit like that." Why? Because only at my level, and he got out a ruler and measured the actual width of the stripe. Only at my level can you have a stripe that wide on your suit. An incredibly important and revealing symbol. It says you need to behave in this culture. I'm in control. It's about hierarchy. I think you see my point. So what are the symbols in your organization that you're privileging? Are they serving you? Are they serving the leadership work? Do they need to be changed? Stories and myths. We know that stories and myths circulate around the organization. Some of them are true, some of them are absolutely not true. Again, what are the stories and myths? They tell you a lot about the culture. Are they serving you? Do you need to invent, I use that word advisedly, do you need to start circulating new stories to try and get the culture where you want it to be? Rituals and routines. Organizations are full of rituals and routines. Meetings, sometimes they're unnecessary. This model asks you to critically reflect on the routines and the rituals in the organization. Are they serving you? Again, do you need to change them? And let's now move on to the almost harder issues, things that we've discussed in the course as well, of power, structure, and control. We will have worked with you and thought about power and influence. So really beginning to think about what is the power dynamics in this organization? What things are discussed, what things aren't discussed? What does that reveal about the way power and influence works? So again, really deep analysis required. Maybe harder to shift these, but again, understanding it helps. Structure. I think that's pretty self-evident, really. What is the structure? Is it a team-based structure? Is it very hierarchical? Is it serving you? And then crucially, for me, this has been incredibly important when I've tried to help organizations shift their culture. That is around the control systems. We know in organizations that what you measure is what you get. So there's enormous value in understanding how people are measured, what their incentives are, what their career structure incentives are. Are they serving you? Can you change them? Can you nudge them? So that really is very briefly the model. And of course, organizational culture is not one thing. It's full of subcultures. We also know that culture is very much influenced by history. I would argue that having a deep analysis of the history of the organization really is very, very important. If you really want to understand the Saïd Business School culture, you have to go back 50 years where a group of entrepreneurial academics really said, we need business in Oxford. And there's a story behind that, which when we meet, I'm sure we'll share.